Hi there.
My name's Jasmine.
My name's Sarah. Nice to meet you. Alright, so how this interview is going to go today, I'm going to be asking you 6 questions. We have about 15 minutes for all of your answers, and then I will open up the floor for questions from you.
Okay, great.
Alright, so our first question is, tell me about yourself.
I am a native of Seattle. I grew up in a suburb of Seattle, and I've always been super into sports. I started playing my first sport when I was 5 years old, and I've been playing sports ever since then. I went to an all-girls school right outside of downtown, so in Capitol Hill area, and was really involved in sports there too. I was a sport and spirit officer, so I specialized in getting information about sporting events to all of our class. And I also was a four-year varsity athlete there. So I was involved in a lot of leadership positions with the team, and I was in charge of organizing a lot of things, which transferred over to the summers when we would run our basketball camps. And by my second year, I ended up running the basketball camps and making sure that everything was organized, our tournaments were set up, and everything like that. And then I went to Western, was a 4-year athlete there as well, played basketball. And I majored in physical education because that's something that's always been super important to me. Growing up, I noticed, especially in girls, that as we got older, the participation in sports went down. And I've always thought that that's really important because that can lead to different issues later. And so athletics and sports have always been a big part of my life. And I wanted to be able to teach kids how important they can be and how much they can help with mental aspects of life and confidence and things like that. Yes.
Okay. Alright, what would you do for your first day of class?
So my first day of class, I would first have the kids come in. I put them in their squad areas, which would be their spots that they go to for the beginning of every class. So there should be no question about where they go. And these areas are also going to be used, like the rows are going to be used later if I need kids to do something. So I'll send them by row to go do something and explain that. And then I would also make sure that everybody knew who I was, a little bit of my background. And after that, I would have the kids find a buddy for their class or for our class, and their buddy would be somebody that they would go to if they have questions, or if I asked them to explain something to somebody, they would explain it to their buddies. And they would also be using these buddies as a way to send them to different spots if we were doing stations. So if I said, Joe, go with your buddy to station 2, they would automatically know who was going, and it'd be an easier way to set up the class and get things moving quickly. After that, I would give them a quick tour of our gym, so show them where all of our different equipment is, where things should go when we're done, where they're expected to put their things when they come in, and just a quick review of everything. And then following that, we would go into our classroom norms and what our class should look like every day, going over some rules for our class. And then if we would try to get into some games, so we go through all that quickly as possible and go into getting to know you games and ways to get me to know the students and the students to know me, and also the students to know one another.
Okay. All right. What is your classroom management plan?
I think that a big thing for me especially is the idea of respecting one another, respecting what you have, and also respecting teachers. And so I would make sure that I emphasize that at the beginning of the year and reminding them what our classroom should look like, how we should be treating each other, how we should be treating me as a teacher, and how we should be treating all of our teachers on the campus. So I'd make sure that I emphasize that. And then I would challenge the kids to talk to somebody about what they can do to respect somebody, how they would respect another person in our class, and make sure they come up with their own ideas so they really understand what it is. And then after that, I would make sure that I got the kids involved in making rules for our class. So that later on, if we were to break a rule or have an issue with rules, they would know that this is something that they agreed to. At the beginning of the year, we talked about it, so there shouldn't be any issues with our rules because they came up with the rules themselves. And then following that, I would go through what we're doing for the class. So my plan for management is if I have an issue with a kid the first time, I'm going to have them sit out for a little bit and then come talk to me about what we're going to do for the rest of the class to avoid having that problem. And then after that, if they still are having issues, then I will talk, I'll talk to them again, and they'll have to fill out a management plan for themselves. So that could look like they're writing a letter to me, they're writing a letter to another student that they might have been having an issue with, or they're writing a letter to their parents or to their primary teacher, just to make sure that they actually understand what was going on and they can write it down and fully understand it. And if that is also an issue, if we have another issue later in the class, then I would have to deal with an outside person to come and help me deal with it, whether that's the principal or their primary teacher or their parent. It really would depend on the kind of issue that we were having in the class at that time. But hopefully with them making their own rules and with the explanations of what is expected early in the class, we won't have those kind of issues.
Okay. All right. How would you communicate with parents?
I think communication with parents is super important for all teachers. And I know with PE teachers, we don't necessarily get as much attention when it comes to parent-teacher nights because they're not looked at the same way as primary teachers are. So I think that it's really important for me to go and reach out to parents, and when I have my parent-teacher nights, trying to see if I can talk to some parents whenever there's a chance to. And then if I'm not getting as many as I would like, I really would like to have something outside of those normal hours. So I think it would be great if we could have something outside of the school week, maybe on a weekend, where we can get the parents to come and participate in physically active settings with their kids. So that way the kids can see their parents having fun and playing with them, and also the parents can come and see how I am with the kids and how our class is set up and the expectations. And it's also a chance for me to get to know the parents that we have at the school a little bit better. So.
All right. Okay. How would you respond if a supervisor asked you to do something that you're not comfortable with?
I think that going back to this, respect is really important. So if I respect my supervisor, my supervisor respects me, I think that it's easy to deal with these kind of conflicts. And for me, it's really, if it's a situation where I don't feel comfortable, most of the time it's because I don't understand the reason behind why it's happening. So if I would just normally solve it by asking questions, making sure I fully understand what the purpose of it is. And if I still have an issue with it, then I would probably talk to my supervisor or one of my peers to try to figure out if there's something that I'm missing from the information and why that situation would need to be handled in that way. But I really think it's important to have an open line of communication with my supervisors, and I've always tried to make sure that I have that with my supervisors, so that if there is an issue later or if I need help with something later, there's somebody that I can go to as a resource.
Okay. All right, and what do you think your strengths and weaknesses will be?
For strength, I think that I have a lot of knowledge in this area. So when I was doing my practicum at Western, I worked with kids from kindergarten through high school, and I worked with a lot of kids in different settings. I worked with doing a walking class for kids and dealing with, we had a few pregnant mothers there, and a lot of different, I've also worked with kids who have mental disorders. Did a class at a high school that was exclusively for kids with physical or mental disorders. And so I think it'd be super helpful for me because I have that experience, and I have experience with organizing group big groups. And I also think that a strength of mine would be that I am very easy to communicate. I communicate with people very easily. Don't really have a problem with saying how I feel, which is incredibly helpful, especially with dealing with kids and making sure that we get through things as quickly as possible without avoiding issues, so that if there is an issue, I address it right away and it goes away. Or not necessarily, but the idea is that it will go away quickly because of how quickly I can address the issue. And then for weakness, I think that when I get involved in something, and especially with kids, I feel the need to really, really focus on helping that one kid if I see that they're struggling. And so a lot of times I would find myself, if there was one kid, I was doing art projects with a kid once, and I saw that one kid was having a really, really hard time using his scissors, and I would try to help him so much with using his scissors, and then other kids needed help with something else. And I think at that moment I had to step back and really assess the situation and figure out a way to help him and help all the other kids in the group. And so that has been something that I struggle with, but I have always I've started to try to take a step back, look at everything that's going on, and figure out a way to do that. So with that specific situation, I ended up pairing him with a buddy that could help him, and normally a kid that is older or more developed in that certain situation to help out the other one. And I also think another weakness is that I can be very blunt, and I know that a lot of people have a hard time responding when things are very direct. So I try to, before I go to respond to somebody, really think about how I'm going to say it. And if it's my first time talking to this person or having to communicate with this person in this way, then I will say it as nice as I can until I get to know them better and see what their responses are to different kinds of communication. And then I can use that specific type of communication with them later if it's the most effective.
Okay. All right. That is the end of my questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. So as an administrator, what is your relationship like with your staff?
My relationship with my staff is that I tend to be fairly involved and yet also hands off. So I will ask that you submit weekly reports of what's been going on in your classroom, and then we will meet once a month and discuss anything if you do need that meeting. I try to know what's going on and know what's going on with my teachers, but I like the teachers to have the liberty to do what they think is best, and I don't often step in unless there's something going against my better judgment.
And then will I be asked to step in for other teachers or help out with other classrooms? I know that sometimes like PE teachers go on field trips if they can, so what would that look like for me?
I think that's up to personal preference. We don't require that for any of our PE teachers unless you aren't getting your maximum hours in. Okay. You're welcome to go on field trips if they need more chaperones. We might ask you to fill in for a PE class if there's another PE teacher that can't be there, okay. But it really is up to personal preference.
Okay. And then that goes kind of into my next. How many PE teachers are there, and do you know how they work together?
Yeah, so we typically have 2 PE teachers per class. There are 10 total for this institution, and we are currently looking to fill, obviously, that 10th spot. So it's 2 per class. You'll be teaching a range of grades. Typically, we're hiring for the 4th and 5th grade position right now. So that's who you'd be working with typically.
Okay. And then how do you check that we meet state standards for the class? Like, are you expecting me to give you my lesson plan for the week or like for the day, or do I give you my lesson plans at all?
Something that I didn't mention earlier is that I will come observe one of your classes, and I won't let you know which one I'm going to come observe, so I will just come and observe your class, kind of see if you're following what a good state qualified lesson plan is, and then I may ask to review one of your lesson plans throughout the year. With our new teachers, we do a little bit more review just to make sure that everything is up to what our school expects, but typically I follow just state guidelines.
Okay, that's all my questions for you.
Okay.
Yes, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. We'll get back to you by the end of the week.
Okay, thank you.